Nigerian Bureau de Change operators get new CBN guidelines, even as Nigeria stops exports of liquefied petroleum gas. Now, Kenya and Namibia have been added to the Financial Action Task Force grey list. This is Business Edge. I am Lekon Onobanjo. Many thanks for joining us on the show. First, we bring you our top business stories from across the continent. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has set up an economic advisory committee comprising the federal government, subnationals, and the private sector. The president announced the setting up of the committee after he held a meeting with some key stakeholders at the State House in Abuja on Sunday evening. Tinubu said the goal is to provide additional efforts in stabilising the economy and ensuring the best economic future for Nigerians. According to an official transcript of the meeting, President Tinubu told his guests that his government was looking for additional efforts that could help poor Nigerians in this difficult period. Away from that, West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS has said on Saturday that it would lift strict sanctions on Niger as it seeks a new strategy to dissuade three junta-led nations from withdrawing from the political and economic union, a move that threatens regional integration. Leaders of the Economic Community of West African States met to address a potential economic and political crisis in the Coup-hit region that deepened in January with military-ruled Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali's decision to exit the 15-member bloc. Now, interest rates eased marginally for the 8th week running in Ghana on the fixed income market. The yields on Ghana's treasury bills continue to ease in line with most analysts' forecasts. According to the auction results by the Bank of Ghana, the rate on the 91-day bill went down by 70 basis points to 27.82%. And that of the 182-day bill, however, remained unchanged at 29.74%. And the 364-day bill dropped to 30.29% from the previous 30.89%. Meanwhile, the government of Ghana recorded 11.20% oversubscription over the ambitious target of 6.26 billion Ghanaian cedis. It accepted all the bids submitted worth 6.97 billion Ghanaian cedis. About 3.41 billion Ghanaian cedis, representing 48.94%, came from the 91-day bill. All the bids were accepted. And that's it on the business stories. We go on a short break, and when we return, we'll bring you market updates. Bringing you Market Watch. Nigerian investors endured a tough week in the stock market, collectively losing an estimated 1.99 trillion naira by Friday, February 23. Now, this significant decline was primarily driven by plummeting shares and the prices of major companies like Dangote Cement, MTN, and BUA Cement. The week witnessed the Nigerian Stock Exchange closing in negative territory with a 3.44% decrease. Now, let's bring you a recap of Friday's trading activities. We look at the all share index right now, even as we let you see about 102,088.07 is what the closing is, with about 0.84% in change. A quick look at the market capitalization mark. We see it's still over around the 55 trillion naira threshold with just about 0.84% change also. Now, looking at the top price gainers for Friday, we see Julie topping the list, closing at about 2 naira 34 kobo. Darcom, of course, about 79 kobo. The change is just about 9 percentage points, with PZ, Veritas Cap, and FBNH concluding the remaining three. A look at the top losers now. Morrison tops the charts for the losers, closing at 1 naira 67 kobo, followed by the livestock, 1 naira 49 kobo. Guinea insurance, well, losing about 40, closing at about 40 kobo. And we see the changes just about 9% in losses. Looking at the changes with Omatech, Regal Insurance also closing at 70 kobo and 42 kobo there. Finally, we look at the sectoral performance. Well, we still see the banking industry topping the charts with about 67% in change, followed by insurance, including oil and gas, consumer goods, industrial goods, also making up the 5 sectoral performance list that we have for you for Friday. We're now going on a short break, and when we return, we'll delve into the first conversation for the day. The Central Bank of Nigeria has issued a revised draft about the regulatory and supervisory guidelines for the Bureau de Change operations in Nigeria for stakeholder comments and or inputs. Now, the guidelines seek to enhance the regulatory framework for the operations of Bureau de Change as part of ongoing reforms of the Nigerian foreign exchange market. Specifically, it revises the permissible activities, licensing requirements, corporate governance, and anti-money laundering, including combating the financing of terrorism provisions for the BDCs. It also sets out new record-keeping and reporting requirements, among others. To help us unpack this, I'm joined by the President's Bureau de Change operators, Aminu Gwadabe. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Edge.
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning, Nigerians.
Good morning to you too. Now, first, it was a raid by the EFCC, and now new CBN guidelines. Did you see this coming, and do you welcome the approach as directed by the Nigerian government?
First, to be fair, the EFCC Commission, they have applied both genetic and non-genetic engagement. First, by engaging all the stakeholders coming to tell us these are some of the findings about activities, how we can contribute to proceed of stolen funds, to a lot of malpractices in the system, and they encourage us to go and clean our house and put our house in order. And that refusal to comply with that, they are coming full force to ensure that they put house into order. Part of the thing they are seriously against is trading on the street, and also without proper documentation, recording of their transaction. And it was found that most of the street traders are lacking in these obligations until they are not licensed. So after those engagements and still practices continue, they now use the genetic forces to ensure that they achieve their objective. Yes, it's all part of reforms. It might be counterproductive in terms of effectiveness and success. However, our belief is that it's reform, because at the end of the day, they target the wrong people. You know, the whole purpose of the reform of the Bureau de Change to formalize the informal sector. So our call is to continue to engage, to continue to come up with guidelines that will make sure everybody that wants to partake in the foreign exchange transaction must be a registered license. Because we are talking of the oxygen of the country, so it cannot be allowed in the hands of people that are not licensed or registered. Like I also call, it's all part of the FCC, Central Bank, to continue to engage stakeholders.
Okay, Mr. Aminu Gwadabe, just stay with us for a while. We will quickly go on a short break, and we'll pick it up from the angle where you said that the measures might be counterproductive. Just stay with us. You're watching Business Edge, and we have been taking a look at the new CBN rules as handed down to the Bureau de Change operators in Nigeria. We have been talking to the president of the operators, of the BDC operators, that is Aminu Gwadabe. And earlier on, he talked about the fact that despite the fact that it throws its weight behind these new measures by the Apex Bank, these measures in some areas might be counterproductive. So, Mr. Aminu Gwadabe, let me just bring you on at this point and do a bit of breakdown looking at the guidelines and the areas they cover. We're looking at permissible activities, licensing requirements, corporate governance, issues around anti-money laundering and combating financing of terrorism. Now, also it includes record keeping and reporting of requirements. So when you look at all these new provisions, which of these excites you and your members, and which would you consider unnecessary and probably counterproductive, as you earlier claimed?
The excitement I have first is releasing the draft before the final order. This is the first time, and I appreciate the central bank of trying to carry the stakeholders along before they make any of their guidelines as a regulation. So it is a draft. It's good to make that clarification. It's not cast on stone, and that for having the thought of saying, okay, stakeholders should put their input, that's a very good excitement. I will appreciate that, because it's the first time that a central bank will issue a guideline, a draft guideline for stakeholders and operators to put their input in our own sector. So we appreciate that magnanimity, and we hope before the final regulation, engagement will continue, recognition will continue. So that's a good excitement. Number two, it also provides opportunities in terms of expansion of the permissible activities, like you have said, and stuff like that. Number three, it is also a credible opportunity. It provides a credible opportunity for capitalization and...
Okay, I understand that is back online. We lost you for a moment there, Mr. Gwadabe. Can you please just round up on what you were saying earlier?
I said mentioned some of the low-hanging fruit, but also the concern is, it might encourage money laundering. There are a lot of people that, stock somewhere. So a retail trader like Bureau de Change, they are saying its capitalization is 2 billion. So if care is not taking what you are running away, you come and meet it in your front. So that capitalization is a huge concern, from 35 billion to 2 billion. Other jurisdictions like India is about $67,000 capitalization. Like in Kenya is $50,000 capitalization. That's, we are talking about 75 million naira. In also Tanzania is $200,000. We are talking about 150 million capitalization. So these are jurisdictions that we have studied, and we found that this is their capitalization. So if we are following global practice, I think we should also work along those levels. And the most worrisome one is the compulsory deposit. For instance, take Money Point. Money Point is a microfinance bank. Their entire capital is 50 million naira capitalization. And then we are retail FX dealers. We don't take customer deposits. If you look at the guidelines, such practices are even not allowed for a FX BDC to collect customers' deposit or do a kind of banking transaction. So forcing the Bureau de Change to keep a huge sum of 200 million as caution deposit in court, I think that will negate even the principle of the global practices.
Okay, you've actually highlighted a couple of unwholesome practices by Bureau de Change operators, but then let's be critical a bit. Before now, the study of the depreciation in the value of the naira had been blamed on speculative activities, holding of the greenback, including round tripping, according to what we know, said to be masterminded by BDC operators. What's your take on this? Why is it that the association or the body had to wait for the Central Bank of Nigeria to come up with policies to counter these activities, knowing fully well that you are the president and there's something that you could have done in terms of having internal mechanisms to deal with these issues?
Well, first, you see, I don't think even you that you are asking this question, you still have the same perception with all the revelation we have been seeing about how speculators, how we have seen financial enablers. In UK, even banks, fintech, lawyers, estate agents have been classified as financial enablers, which means they can aid money laundering. We have seen a lot of malpractices. I can say the jurisdiction has indicated now from the generalization of criminalization and stigmatization, which has been the perception of the regulators, of even the fiscal authorities and the security agencies. A lot of revelation have, investigation have revealed the BDC are even the better side than some of these corporate organizations that we all admit should believe in. So we are happy that there is a change of perception, there is a change of mind from the regulators, from the security agencies about the earlier wrong perception they have about the Bureau de change. The Bureau de change played the third role leg of the market. Even with the conception of I&E window, is a three-leg market. You have the central bank, you have the commercial banks, and you have the Bureau de change. So whereby you now exclude the Bureau de change just on the basis of stigmatization, a sector that is contributing liquidity, a sector that you meant to stem volatility, a sector that you meant to provide the critical retail needs of the market. Somebody traveling, somebody go to a hospital, it's a sector that have the compromise, it's a sector, the compassion. It's a sector that have the convenience. When you are coming from, say, UK now, you come to the airport, you will not see a bank opening for you to exchange your dollar. It's the Bureau de change that you see. And like I said, over time, we have ensured that we perform that obligation of maintaining liquidity in the market. In 2006, when we have this spiral volatility, the BDC were used as vehicle to control the volatility. In 2009, the BDC were used to control the volatility.
Okay.
In 2006,
but some people would actually, say that they do not feel the impact of the support that the BDCs has or have given in terms of ensuring liquidity in Forex in Nigeria. But then Aminu Gwadabe, President, Bureau de Change Operators, we say thank you so much for giving so much insight to our discussion this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We're now going on a short break. When we return, we'll look at Nigerian government saying that it has stopped the export of LPG. The question is, to what end? To stay with us. The liquefied petroleum gas, commonly known as cooking gas, skyrocketed to about 1,300 naira per kilogram early this month from less than 500 naira in 2018, sending shockwaves through households nationwide and adding another layer of burden to an already strained population. In a move aimed at curbing the rising cost of cooking gas, the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Ekperikpe Ekpo, announced the immediate suspension of LPG exportation. Now, how effective will this be in reducing the price of this commodity? This morning, Tolulokpe Aderemi, partner, Perch, Stone and Grace, joins me to talk about this. It's nice to have you around, Tolulokpe Aderemi, on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
So I would like us to do a bit of foundation building before we get into your thoughts looking at the suspension of the LPG exportation mechanism. Now, speaking to the gas value chain in Nigeria and the current challenges bedeviling the sector, how do you see it?
Well, let me start by saying it's not a new issue in the country at all. And I think successive governments have tried over the years to try and correct that part of the value chain. And essentially, like we both know, the main problem around that value chain is the price of gas. And you see, to the extent that we can make the price, of gas cost reflective, I think we will overcome that challenge. But let me, speaking of the foundation as you talked about, and I thank you very much for picking on this topic of LPG. I think the conversation sometimes may be misdirected. And what do I mean? So the conversation around the suspension or the ban, as they have used it, of the LPG, I think the foundation of it is what is misplaced, and which was why I thanked you for that foundation. And what's that foundation, if you may ask me? The foundation is the real people who this thing affects are not really within the equation of this conversation. The hike in the price of LPG, for both of us, you and I, we can afford it. But the truth of the matter is it's a strain on us, but yet we still may be able to buy it. But the real people who the conversation should focus on are the 68.3% of those who still use solid biomass to cook. These are the people who, about 175 million of them, they have no access at all to LPG. And so rather than focus on the conversation around non-affordability, I focus, and I urge the media to also look at the absence of access at all. And why is this important? It's important because every year, my brother, 93,300 people die in this country as a result of climate impact, both of deforestation and cooking emission. And this is not my statistics. This is the statistics from the World Health Organization. Who are these 93,000? They are our girl children. They are our wives. They are our mothers. These are people who are traditionally charged with using charcoals, using firewood, etc. Those are the people that this thing really affects. And these are the category of people that we should take out from that equation into the equation of the use of LPG. But the question is, which again is something we need to start focusing on, why do they still use solid biomass? So rather than focus on, oh, we cannot afford it, there's hike in price. Truth is, I mean, it's only if you and I are deceiving ourselves. 18,000 is a strain, but we may be able to afford it. But this category of people that I talk about that die every year don't even have any enlightenment knowledge of it at all. And for those who even have, there's this traditional custom of, if I cook with solid biomass materials, I'm likely to get a better taste of the food. So I'm sure you probably have heard that when I cook jollof rice with firewood, I'm likely to get a better taste.
Aderemi, permit me to come in here. If, of course, from what you're saying means that this particular approach is knee-jerk and probably might provide short-term solutions, are there any need to probably long-term solutions that you would say this particular directive would afford the country?
The long-term solution, can I go ahead?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. You see, the long-term solution is that we need to shore up our production capacity for LPG in Nigeria. It will interest you to know that our capacity today is only 69,968 MT, which we use in Nigeria. Compare that to what they have in Ghana. Ghana has over 200,000. And this 69,000, something that I've talked about, is only utilized by only 200 registered LPG bottling plants in Nigeria. And so let's start that conversation from there. So we complain about hiking price, but what's the production capacity? We don't produce beyond what our capacity is. And that was what birthed what I'm sure you would have read, which is the Decade of Gas Initiative. And that's a crucial point. Was that Decade of Gas Initiative? It demonstrated government's intention to investing in the LPG market. And I can give you some small statistics regarding the extent of investment. So we have thought about it long before now. Our production facilities, the LPG production facilities, we budgeted 2 billion, at least to put us into where you expect us to be in that long-term place. For distribution and marketing, we had the same 2 billion. For storage, we budgeted 750 million. Bottling plants, we budgeted 750 million. And I can go on and go on like that. Now, these were expected to impact different sectors, i.e., electricity, so it was to affect power generation, it was to affect the auto gas. We all remember the auto gas initiative. It was to affect industries.
Okay, now, Aderem, you've also mentioned the cost implication of having these particular commodities supplied to end users. But then, according to what we know, there are internal saboteurs. Now, a few issues have actually been identified by operators and marketers in the Nigeria's domestic markets, and this includes a trend where you see some certain off-takers who have allocations with the NLNG, but they do not have any facility with which to process it. But then you see them still going around to sell such commodity at a double offtake price to some marketers, which in a way inflates the price when it gets to the market. So another is the multiplicity of taxes and fees by agencies of government. So how challenging are these issues? How concerning are they? And what can be done to nip them?
Certainly they're challenging, but they're not new. And so when you look at the various sectors, it happens in all sectors. And you see, sometimes when you bid for a commodity or you bid for a project, you don't necessarily need to, I mean, it's just like, for example, when you import petroleum products into the country, you don't necessarily need to have a storage facility. What you must have is evidence that you have access to one. And so that is why you find out that importers will normally have, marketers will normally have what is called throughput agreements. And throughput agreements means it's an understanding between you and an existing storage facility owner, such that once your petroleum product gets in the country, you can store it there. That storage facility is a prerequisite, or is a sine qua non, as we put it in law, for you to obtain an import license in the first. So it's not new at all.
Okay.
I think what is troubling, which is what your question is the fact that you see the regulator, which in this case is the authority, should set up a task force. Because once we understand that when you sell this license or this permit in the secondary market, it hikes the price, of the product, which is antithetical to the overall objective, of government. So set up a task force. Just the way task force, followed up with the equalization form in the upstream oil sector, if you remember. So set up that task force. Let the task force focus on it, and then we'll naturally. I don't think that is too much. I'm more worried about, the consequences of even this ban, this so-called ban that we see. It has good sides. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
We can look at the positive consequences and the negative, but we just have to strike a balance.
All right, definitely. We need to strike a balance. So, look, Aderemi, partner, Perchstone and Grace, thank you so much for your time on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
We now go on a short break. When we return, we'll bring you the concluding part of the program. Just stay with us. According to reports, Kenya and Namibia have been added to the grey list by the Financial Action Task Force, a global anti-money laundering watchdog, due to deficiencies in dealing with money laundering and terrorist financing. This move puts Kenya under increased scrutiny, requiring critical changes to its financial infrastructure to mitigate the risk of being a haven for illicit funds. Now, Kenya, previously considered a financial hub in the region, is now among 27 countries on the grey list, which includes Nigeria, South Africa, Mali, Mozambique, Burkina Faso, Senegal and Cameroon. The downgrade may result in stricter due diligence, posing challenges in securing funding and causing reputational damage. The government, which had made amendments to anti-money laundering laws, expresses commitments to addressing deficiencies and expects a minimal impact on the economy. And at this point, joining me from Paris in France is Esteban Gudici, Senior Policy Advisor, Transnational Alliance to Combat Illicit Trade. That's TRASI. Thank you so much, Esteban, for joining us.
No, thank you, Lekan. It's a pleasure for us to be here this morning with you.
Now, did you see this grey listing of Kenya and Namibia as a surprise to you?
Well, It was not necessarily a surprise, but one thing that you mentioned correctly in your introduction is that it has been placed in the grey list, both Kenya and Namibia. This is the common jargon, but normally it's called jurisdictions under increased monitoring. This means that the countries pledge to continue working with the Financial Action Task Force, which is different from the blacklist, which is non-cooperative jurisdictions, which is not the case here. But well, you asked me if this came as a surprise. In relation to Kenya, I must say that this was not a surprise. There were rumors already. Last week we discussed specifically how Kenya would work to improve its regulations in relation to cryptocurrencies. And this was one of the recommendations issued by the Financial Action Task Force, meaning that Kenya needs to work on this. But it was not a surprise because during the year 2021, culminating in year 2022, there was a mutual evaluation report which was conducted by the East and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group. This is a FATF, a Financial Action Task Force regional group, which is devoted to make these kind of assessments. When this assessment was done, it could be evidence that there were some shortcomings in what has to do with the strategic to fight money laundering and financing of terrorism in Kenya, including what I mentioned about virtual assets. Probably I'm going to elaborate more on that later. And in relation to Namibia, this is a little bit the same in the sense that the last mutual evaluation that was done in Namibia demonstrated that there were many recommendations of the Financial Action Task Force that were adequately implemented in the country, but there were some problems with at least 6 or 7 issues that, measurements that need to be taken, that it's a problem mostly related to effectiveness of how things are effectively implemented in the country. And this is why it has also been placed in the grey list. But I believe that for both countries, this is not that dramatic. And well, I guess that we will discuss this in your questions that are coming.
Yeah, hopefully if you have enough time. Well, we know that whether being on a grey list or a black list, they actually attract serious economic implications for these countries. So then let's look at how these designation influence both nations, that is Kenya and Namibia, in terms of their strategy for expansion into investment sources and, of course, to build international business operations, because I know that Kenya particularly is actually critical about this.
Yes, well, as a general remark, we can say that when a country is placed in the grey list, there are implications that have to do with reputation. Normally, there is less investment in the country. And one of the most, let's say, tangible manifestations is that there is always problems with the cross-border transactions because the different countries that need to work with the concerned country, the financial entities, will have more due diligence and more checks and balances before receiving inflows or outflows. So this is something that impacts the economy of all countries. I can tell you that, for instance, the International Monetary Fund has found that countries who are subject to the Financial Action Task Force grey list suffer an average net loss of 7.6% of capital inflow across their borders when this happens. Now, if we go specifically into detailing what has to do with Kenya and with Namibia, I think, well, they are two very different countries in the sense of their economy. Last week we were discussing Kenya. It's a market that it's growing a lot in terms also in fintech. And I think that this is going to undermine a little bit the prospects of the country. And it's a shame because the projected growth for 2023 was 5.6% of the GDP, which is, for me, it's very good. So the prospects were good. The imports and exports that the country had, the exports were worth 7 billion in 2022, and the expectation is that this was going to keep on growing, also in relation to fintech. The fact that it has been subject to the grey list of the Financial Action Task Force undermines these good economic prospects. Likewise with Namibia.
Okay, so basically the underlying aim is to ensure that these countries deal decisively with issues around terrorism financing and money laundering cases. Those are the allegations leveled against this country. So what are the specific areas you believe Kenya and Namibia should work upon in dealing with these issues?
Well, Kenya has committed, and I think that what needs to be tackled by the country specifically is to improve the strategy. It needs to be streamlined. There is also something that we discussed last week that it has to do with the licensing and supervision of virtual asset service providers. This is all related to cryptocurrency because the country uses a lot of cryptocurrency, and the FATF discussed this last week. And this is something that needs to be looked at. So these are the two basic ones from Kenya. In relation to Namibia, I think that it has a lot to do with the improvement of the effectiveness of the investigations. They need to have more numbers on investigations related to money laundering, and also they need to tackle everything that has to do with non-profit operators. These are the two main takeaways for each of these countries.
Okay, Mr. Ben Gudici, Senior Policy Advisor, Trusted, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
My great pleasure. Have a nice day.
And you too. And that's it on today's edition of Business Edge. Do not forget that you can visit our social media handles at News Central TV, and also head on to our website www.newscentral.africa, and don't forget to download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. We'll be back tomorrow 11 a.m. West African time, even as we look at other African angle business issues right here on News Central Television. I am Lekon Obanjo. Enjoy the rest of your day.